When asked by a student at Rochester University whether the bomb exploded at Alamogordo was the first one to be detonated, Robert Oppenheimer gave a shocking answer. He said, "Well, yes. In modern times, of course." This cryptic answer kept many people wondering for decades. If someone who literally built the first nuke and watched the process is saying that it was only the first time in modern times, does it mean that there were atomic weapons detonated in ancient times? This is one interpretation of Oppenheimer's answer that leads many people to believe that he was referring to a weapon mentioned in ancient Hindu scriptures. In this video, we delve into the fascinating bond between Oppenheimer and the Bhagavad Gita, exploring how this ancient text influenced his spiritual life, work, and philosophical outlook.
He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed, few people cried, most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb and the scientific director of the Manhattan Project, was deeply influenced by the Bhagavad Gita, a sacred Hindu scripture. The enormity of his scientific pursuit weighed heavily on him, and he found solace and guidance in the verses of the Bhagavad Gita. His first encounter with the text came in 1933 when he visited the Gita Bhavan, a temple in California, and was deeply moved by what he read. Oppenheimer was drawn to the Bhagavad Gita's depiction of a world in which morality is not always black and white, but rather a complex struggle in the cosmos largely outside of one's control. This appealed to Oppenheimer, who was grappling with his own moral quandaries as he oversaw the development of a weapon of unprecedented destructive power. Oppenheimer's interest in the Bhagavad Gita was so intense that it bordered on obsession. He would hand out copies of the Gita to friends and even named his car Garuda after the eagle vehicle of Lord Vishnu. His personal copy of the Gita, translated by Arthur Ryder, is one of only 2 personal objects of his kept by the Los Alamos National Library. At difficult junctures in his life, Oppenheimer would invoke lines from the Bhagavad Gita. For example, upon hearing of the death of President Franklin Roosevelt, he incorporated some lines from the Gita into his eulogy. 2 days before the Trinity test, he shared a translation of a passage from the Gita with Vannevar Bush, director of the U.S. Office of Scientific Research and Development. Another passage that Oppenheimer later recounted going through his head upon seeing the Trinity test was,
Trinity.
"If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the Mighty One." This passage from the Bhagavad Gita captures the awe and terror of witnessing the first atomic explosion. Oppenheimer's relationship with the Bhagavad Gita was complex and multifaceted. He was drawn to its spirituality, its wisdom, and its insights into the human condition. But he also struggled with its fatalism and its acceptance of violence. The Bhagavad Gita is a sacred Hindu text that is part of the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is an ancient Indian epic poem that tells the story of a great war between 2 rival-related families, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. In the Mahabharata, Arjuna, the 3rd Pandava prince, was offered a choice by Krishna between his entire army and Krishna himself. Arjuna chose Krishna, knowing that his counsel would be more valuable than any number of soldiers. The Bhagavad Gita is a pivotal episode in the Mahabharata in which Arjuna is reluctant to fight his own kinsmen from the Kauravas. He saw them as fathers, grandfathers, teachers, uncles, cousins, and great men that he couldn't kill with an easy heart. What takes place is a dialogue between the warrior prince Arjuna and his charioteer Krishna, who is an incarnation and embodiment of the supreme godhead Vishnu. In the Hindu trinity, Brahma is the creator god, Vishnu is the preserver god, and Shiva is the destroyer god. The three gods are often depicted together as a symbol of the cyclical nature of the universe. Since Krishna in the context of the Gita is an incarnation of Vishnu, then his role is to preserve creation in some way, even by means of war. The Gita is a complex text that explores a variety of philosophical and spiritual themes, including dharma, duty, karma, action, moksha, liberation, and bhakti, devotion. It's also a practical guide to living a moral and ethical life. The Gita has been translated into many languages and is one of the most widely read and influential spiritual texts in the world. It has been studied and interpreted by scholars and practitioners of Hinduism for centuries. The Gita is also popular among people of other faiths, as it offers universal insights into the human condition and the path to spiritual liberation. The Mahabharata is set in the Kali Yuga, the fourth and final of the four yugas in Hindu cosmology. The Bhagavad Gita describes the yugas as cyclical periods of time that follow a specific pattern. First comes Satya Yuga, the Golden Age, characterized by truth, righteousness, and peace. After that, Treta Yuga, the Silver Age, characterized by a decline in virtue and an increase in violence. Then, Dvapara Yuga, the Bronze Age, characterized by further decline in virtue and an increase in conflict. And finally, Kali Yuga, the Iron Age, characterized by the lowest level of virtue and the highest level of conflict. The Kali Yuga is a time of darkness and ignorance. It is a time when people are more likely to act selfishly and unethically. However, it's also a time of opportunity for spiritual growth. Those who are able to overcome the challenges of the Kali Yuga can achieve liberation from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The Bhagavad Gita is a text that is particularly relevant to the Kali Yuga. Oppenheimer's embrace of the Bhagavad Gita during the Manhattan Project is particularly striking. The Gita is a text that celebrates duty and action, even in the face of great adversity. It's a text that emphasizes the importance of detachment from the fruits of one's actions. Oppenheimer, on the other hand, was leading a project that was developing a weapon of unprecedented destructive power. He knew that the use of this weapon would likely result in an apocalypse. So, how could Oppenheimer reconcile his commitment to the Gita with his role in the Manhattan Project? Oppenheimer's commitment to the Bhagavad Gita and his role in the Manhattan Project can be reconciled through the concept of dharma. Dharma is a Sanskrit word that can be translated as cosmic order or righteous action and duty. It's a complex concept that encompasses a variety of ethical and moral principles. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches Arjuna about his dharma as a warrior. Oppenheimer may have seen his role in the Manhattan Project as a similar test of his dharma. He may have believed that it was his duty to develop the atomic bomb, even though he knew that it could be used to kill innocent people. Krishna also teaches Arjuna that it is important to be detached from the fruits of one's actions. This means that Arjuna should not worry about the consequences of his actions, but should simply focus on doing his duty. Oppenheimer may have seen his role in the Manhattan Project as a test of his detachment. His involvement in the Manhattan Project during World War II presented him with a profound moral dilemma. It was a race against time, and the fear that Nazi Germany might develop such a weapon first was a significant driving force. Werner Heisenberg, a prominent German quantum physicist, was working also on Germany's own atomic bomb project for the Nazi regime. So, it was Oppenheimer's duty to lead the Manhattan Project and develop the weapon first. However, that didn't spare him the bad conscience that comes with such an atrocity that took place in Japan.
I believe that the view which I learned from many, but above all from General Marshall and from Colonel Stimson, the Secretary of War, the view that they had that we would have to fight our way to the main islands and that it would involve a slaughter of Americans and Japanese on a massive scale, was arrived at by them in good faith, with regret, and on the best evidence that they then had. To that alternative, I think the bomb was an enormous relief.
In a lecture he gave in November 1947, he said, "In some sort of crude sense which no vulgarity, no humor, no overstatement can quite extinguish, the physicists have known sin, and this is a knowledge which they cannot lose." This brings us to the cyclical nature of history and why we're in the Kali Yuga, which mirrors what took place in the Mahabharata War thousands of years ago. The events of the Mahabharata also mirror what's taking place in modern times. Consider these verses from the Mahabharata. Hurled a single projectile charged with the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as 10,000 suns. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Vrishnis and the Andhakas. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. Hair and nails fell out. Pottery broke without apparent cause. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. To escape from this fire, the soldiers threw themselves in streams. Another passage says, "Dense arrows of flame, like a great shower, issued forth upon creation, encompassing the enemy. Fierce wind began to blow. Clouds roared upward, showering dust and gravel. The very elements seemed disturbed. The sun seemed to waver in the heavens. The earth shook, scorched by the terrible violent heat of this weapon." I don't know what you might be thinking right now, but the Mahabharata is obviously describing what sounds like a nuclear explosion. Archaeological evidence also supports the theory that ancient civilizations had nuclear weapons. For example, skeletons have been found in the ancient cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, with radioactive levels 50 times greater than normal. Additionally, a heavy layer of radioactive ash has been found in Rajasthan, India. Another curious sign of ancient nuclear war is the Lonar crater, located near Mumbai. This crater is nearly circular and 2,154 meters in diameter, and it is less than 50,000 years old. No trace of any meteoric material has been found at the site, which suggests that the crater may have been caused by a nuclear explosion. Robert Oppenheimer was familiar with all of this. That's why when the student asked him whether the bomb exploded at Alamogordo was the first one to be detonated, he gave a cryptic answer. Across the world, in deserts from Libya to the Mojave, lie vast fields of fused glass shards. These formations, called tektites, are unlike anything else found on Earth. They are incredibly pure and transparent, and they bear a striking resemblance to the glass created by nuclear explosions. The most plausible explanation is that an ancient civilization possessed nuclear technology during a previous Kali Yuga. So, could we be living in another Kali Yuga? Many believe that we are, in fact, living in a Kali Yuga right now. They point to the increasing tensions between nuclear powers and the growing threat of climate change, as well as the degeneracy and materialism of the current world order. If we are indeed in the Kali Yuga, then the evidence of ancient nuclear catastrophes should be a warning. And that's exactly why Oppenheimer was so fascinated to the point of obsession with the Bhagavad Gita. It's a sign that we are headed down a dangerous path that keeps getting more dangerous before an apocalypse and before a new golden age ushers in. Only time will tell if we can avoid another nuclear war. However, the evidence from ancient civilizations suggests that we should not take the matter lightly. That's why Oppenheimer the Manhattan Project, and the Bhagavad Gita are making it to public consciousness once again in recent years. It's no wonder why such a genius as Christopher Nolan picked up this cosmic signal, or zeitgeist, or whatever you want to call it. And he decided to direct a Hollywood blockbuster about Oppenheimer.
Robert Oppenheimer, a little while before he died, said that it's perfectly obvious that the whole world is going to hell. The only possible chance that it might not is that we do not attempt to prevent it from doing so.
I highly recommend to anyone watching this video to check out the Bhagavad Gita to fully understand what went into Oppenheimer's mind while reading it. The conversation between Krishna and Arjuna is truly something. If you enjoyed watching this video, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing and leaving a like. That's how we can keep making similar videos about similar subjects.